Hi, Chelsea. I wanted to leave you some feedback on your rough draft. Um, Overall, I think you're working with some interesting ideas. I like that you're kind of pinpointing. It's really different to grow up in a relatively large city and then go to school in a small town and kind of have that shell shock, right? That's kind of a fun idea to play around with. And I wonder if that's something that you can expand on for the narrative. These details here were really good, in that you're giving the reader some details on how large your graduating class is, right? How it was really common for you to walk down the hall and recognize 30 people that you knew, and we don't really have a comparison between maybe like your counterparts here, going to school at Missouri Southern, but I guess that we can kind of imagine that. I don't know if you've heard a story from one of these friends of yours that you've met down here, who maybe went to a high school maybe half your size or with a population of half your size or less. That might be a fun anecdote to include. You write a lot about your really positive uh, experiences in the high school, right? That's really what the second half of the narrative turns into, right? This wonderful uh, uh, anecdote about your college credit classes and this really cool research project that you were able to do, um, along with all of how involved you were, right? So here's what I'm thinking. I really like all these details as separate paragraphs. What I don't quite see yet is a clear narrative, right? So remember in class we were talking this week, we were talking about um, having a clear arc, having a story with a clear beginning, middle, and end. So far, it kind of feels like a bunch of snippets from your life. And at this point, I think it's okay if it is indeed that way. But now you need to start making some decisions about, well, really, what story are you going to tell? I think the one that you begin with is interesting, right? This idea that you were kind of shell shocked when you came down here, to Joplin from Lee Summit. And maybe some of these details, in here about the size, about um, everything that, all the good extracurricular and curricular activities that you were able to experience. Maybe you can kind of compare these with, like I said, with your counterparts here, at Missouri Southern. I don't know. Um, Maybe it simply wants you want it to be a story of your educational journey. I think it could be that too, if you wanted it to be. Um, but like I said, what I don't yet see is one clear arc, right? One clear like high point, um, and and that leads us to your overall main idea. You suggest that, you're really happy with your educational opportunities, and that challenge, um, but I got to tell you that I wasn't sure that that's where you were going in this first paragraph. So like I said before, I'm not quite sure what direction you want to take this in terms of turning it into an actual narrative. I think the transition from Lee Summit to Joplin could be a really interesting story. But as I suggested a moment ago, and where your essay kind of ends up, it might be that you want to tell the story of your educational journey, and that might work too, right? Um, so if that's the case, I think you want to think about, well, what's the arc there, right? What's the arc there? Um, and I'll let you decide that, right? Because that has to be the story that you want to tell. Um, be certain to be aware of your sentence fragments. You don't have many. I just caught a few here and there. So, for example, you say, for the past 18 years of my life, I have lived in Lee's Summit, Missouri. That's a complete sentence. A growing town that has just reached 100,000 citizens. So that's an example of a sentence fragment right here. So this is not a complete sentence. It's either missing a subject or a verb or both. And in this example, it's missing both. So what you do with a sentence fragment, you have to correct it. It's considered an error. So you either add the subject and the verb. So you add what's missing, or you turn it into a modifier and connect it to a complete thought. So I think if you just did this, right, I think the sentence would work, and the ideas will still connect the way that you want them to. Um, Here's another one down here. My class was considered a small class for my school, and had two other high schools in the district with similar size, along with two private schools, Lee's Summit. Something happened here. I think you might be missing a word, but here again, this is an example of a sentence fragment. So you actually want to connect these together as well. Although there's something missing here, read this whole sentence out loud, and then rethink what you're trying to say here, because it sounds like you might be missing a word or two. If you decide to really stretch out these differences between yourself and your new classmates here at Missouri Southern, I think that this is a really fun idea to expand out, right? So, what was their high school life in comparison to yours, right? So, you're talking about class size. You talk about yours in detail, but we don't get theirs. So, that would be a really fun thing to expand on. How they find things to do. Well, what do they do, and what are the similarities and differences between how you spent your free time with your friends in Lee Summit? And this as well, excuse me, and this as well. What are the similarities and differences here? So to me, I don't know. I keep suggesting this. I wonder if it would be interesting to kind of have a coming of age story where two like very different people are coming together on the Missouri Southern campus and becoming friends, right? And if you could stretch that out and talking about those similarities and differences, it might be something really interesting to play around with, and that might end up giving you your arc. So if you could bring in somebody else and like really capture them and talk about their differences in this draft, it might make for something. It might make for a really interesting story. So there's a lot of good stuff to work with. It's just figuring out that arc, right? Figuring out what the narrative is. Um, yeah, I look forward to seeing where you take this, and let me know if you have any questions.